In this video lecture, we're going to talk about healthcare ethics committees. What exactly is a healthcare ethics committee? Well, a healthcare ethics committee, or HEC, is a group of people at a healthcare facility tasked with reviewing and decision making in issues related to administration of the organization and clinical practice and patient issues. Now, some of the things that might come up with administration or policy development, staff education, outreach to the community, and things such as that. In clinical practice and patient issues, there may be cases to do with specific patients, end-of-life issues, other sorts of things that could come up in clinical practice. Now, the author mentions that it's recommended that organizations, and this is going to depend on their size, of course, but that they have subcommittees that deal with various issues. And so you may have committees tasked with certain things that don't overlap with other committees. For example, they develop the standards and policies regarding ethics for the organization, what you should do and shouldn't do, and why. Education of the staff on ethical issues and teaching them what should be done and what shouldn't be done and why. And also, the person on the committee would themselves act as a role model of what an ethical person should behave like. There's clinical consultation. As we mentioned, this is where it's really the ground level stuff, and this is directly with patient issues and various things that could come up in day-to-day practice at a healthcare organization. Resource allocation, and as the chapter mentions, is may not be as common, but maybe becoming more common. It has to do with how does an organization spend the resources that it has, whether that's money, time, and various other things, and how are these things spread out in a way that is indeed ethical. And finally, that very large organizations and teaching hospitals would have institutional review boards, which would look at things, for example, having to do with people who are part of experimental testing, and they would review policies regarding that, make them more explicit, etc. Who would be on an HEC? Well, as you might imagine, doctors often make up the largest proportion of people on them. Of course, you'd want representation from the nursing staff, uh, maybe at least one administrator, someone who is neither a doctor nor a nurse, but has administrative duties within the organization. A social services representative, someone, for example, a social worker, who would be able to address things that are related to patients but are beyond and different from what medical and nursing staff would deal with. The religious organization, you would have a clergy person who would be on the committee, and perhaps an ethicist at a secular institution, although you could have both on the same committee, depending on how large it is. And the ethicist, of course, is a person who's an expert in ethics, possibly also has a law degree. And then, since the organization is part of the community, you'd want someone from the community to be a representative of the community on the HEC. And persons can play different roles here, and depending on what kind of committee, the makeup might be slightly different. Now, what's going to be the background and education of these people? Well, you want people who are at least competent in their area of expertise, and perhaps even more than competent, that they know what they're talking about. They prepare for the meetings, that they show up having looked at the materials and done the reading if there is some, but know what's being talked about and why it's important. That they're up to date on their organization's ethical position. That includes the mission and values and other policies of the organization, so that they can talk within that framework. And that there's someone who's known for high moral principles, someone who is a role model, for their ethical stance, and someone who's above reproach because of the kind of decisions that are being made here. So the text lays out an approach that one would take on such committees. How would the committee proceed once they have an issue in front of them? This is a neat way, I think, that's laid out for any kind of committee that's making these kind of decisions should follow. So one, we certainly need to be clear about what it is we're talking about. Otherwise, we're sort of going about blindly. We need to determine who's going to be affected by the decision that's made here today. We need to make sure we're clear on the facts. If we need more information, we need to find that out. We need to have as much information and facts as we can to make the decision and to make a good one. We need to figure out what ethical principles are at play. We've talked about the 4 ethical principles of non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy, and justice. Well, which one of these are operative here? One or another, or maybe more than one or two. We need to, once we've done this part, we need to discuss the alternatives. Okay, applying your ethical principles to the facts. What are some things we can do? What are some decisions we could take? So we evaluate these alternatives. Can we rank them? Which are the best ones? Which are the ones that are not as good? What are the unintended consequences of some of these decisions that we may not have thought about? What's going to happen when we enact these policies or make these kind of choices? Once we've done that, we would be in a position to select the best one. We'd probably have a vote, and hopefully it would be unanimous if everything had gone well, but maybe not. But at least it would be a clear majority had decided on what's going to be done. And then we would say, okay, is this the best decision? We would look at it one more time before enacting the decision, whether it's a policy or a specific choice that we're making regarding a patient. Okay, so this has just been a brief look at healthcare ethics committees. There's a lot more in the chapter you could read up on, and certainly at some point in your life you may find yourself on such a committee, whether it's at a healthcare organization or some other sort of organization. Cheers.